Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Norfolk Select Board. As a preliminary matter, this is Kevin Kalka, Chair of the Norfolk Select Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on tonight's agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Anita Mecklenburg.
Here.
Cece Van Tine.
Here.
And staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Blythe Robinson.
Here.
And Judith Lazardi.
Here.
Thank you very much. So this open meeting of the Norfolk Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Having gotten through that little intro, Blythe, would you be so kind as to take us through our agenda this evening?
Sure. So we're starting with COVID-19 updates, followed by public comment. We were supposed to have a public hearing regarding the voting, the use classifications of all properties for the purposes of the fiscal year 2021. We need to delay that to another date. We need to pick another time. We're not ready to do that tonight. The action items include considering approval of 2 items regarding the Abbeville 40B project on Lawrence Street, to consider approval of 2 intermunicipal agreements, one with the town of Foxborough and one with the town of Millis, to then consider awarding a contract advantage drug testing for a 3-year period for the administration of a drug and alcohol testing program for municipal employees, to consider amending the fees for liquor license renewals for 2021 for on-premise establishments, to please consider approval of the following licenses expiring at the end of the calendar year, which are liquor, common victular, entertainment, class 1, class 2, class 3, auto dealers, and taxi licenses. If you don't mind, I won't read all of the names of all of the establishments, even though they are listed on the agenda. 2 discussion items, which include discussing website postings of board correspondence, town administrator updates. We have 6 warrants to be approved and 2 sets of minutes to be approved.
Thank you very much, Blythe. So our first item this evening, as Blythe had mentioned, is our COVID-19 updates, where there has been a lot of activity over the course of the last couple of weeks. Blythe, what do we have for tonight?
There has. Unfortunately, our numbers do still continue to go up. While we didn't post on Thanksgiving, because we didn't receive information that day, our numbers were from last Monday to yesterday, went from 366 cases to 403, an increase of 37. We have 67 active cases, and those are both in the facility, which for us is Norfolk MCI prison, and in the community. And over 300 people have recovered. So the numbers are up. We now have been continuously, which means that we had gone back from phase 3, step 2 to phase 3, step 1. In Norfolk, that hasn't as big of an impact on people's, I think, lives as maybe other communities, because you don't have most of the types of establishments that would have to limit their activity. The one that really 2 things that most pertain to us include activities outdoors on town property limited to 50 people, and not as many of those given the colder weather. And then the library has to step back to 40% capacity inside from 50. We had a meeting today on another topic, and I understand that really has not been a problem for the library. They're getting consistent activity, but it hasn't reached the point where they have to turn people away. So That's what's going on locally in Norfolk, and we'll get new numbers again this Thursday. I had hoped that we would be down to the yellow zone when I saw the state's report that came out last Friday. Because our positivity rate had dropped from just over 10% to just over 5%. But with these new numbers, I'm not sure where we're going to be come the end of this week. I did listen in on as I do every other week, on a Zoom call with the MMA, which a lot of the governor's staff attends. And I do understand that the state is required to be turning in their vaccine distribution plan to the federal government at the end of this week. And the federal government does plan to distribute vaccine as it becomes available after it's approved on a method of population. So larger states with larger population are going to get more of the vaccine than states with less. That all being said, you can watch the news as well as I can. Whether the vaccines get emergency approval shortly and how they start how much they can start to distribute will all be something we're all going to learn about. Turning just to the financial side of all of this, as you recall, Norfolk was allocated $1,056,000. We expect that by the end of December, we will have spent just about all of that. We have to have it spent by December 30th under the current rules. We may have a little bit left over. We're monitoring it closely. We've got continuing to have invoices for things like nursing services and PPE and things like that. And obviously monitoring what's happening in Washington. A bipartisan stimulus package did get announced today. Where that goes and what it means, it's beyond my pay grade to know what the outcome of that's going to be, but I know it's being talked about. One thing I can tell you is if that was to pass as it has been proposed, the amount of money for state and local governments is approximately that much the same as it was in the original stimulus package. So we can only surmise that might mean this approximately the same amount coming to Massachusetts and perhaps again to communities, but like I said, it's all way too soon to say, and we're just focused on reporting and following up on what we've been allocated already. So that's my update. Unless there's any specific questions I can answer.
I'll toss it around to the rest of the board for any questions you might have for Blythe related to COVID, starting with Cece.
Blythe, I know you've heard me ask this before, and it's because I'm not a math brain. I hear you telling me the 400 whatever number, which sounds huge and scary, and is, if I'm not mistaken, the number in the town of Norfolk since the outbreak in March, correct?
403 total cases.
So what I'm interested in is what is the number of Norfolk residents that are not in an institution in Norfolk currently active, right? Like if I hear 400, I think, holy crap, there's 400 people. We only have like 10,000 people. What's the number of people currently in the town? And I'm not minimizing the disease, but 400 is a big number for a small town. I know that it's smaller than that. And I know that the number of the 60 plus includes folks within an institution that cannot, with the exception of the COs, interact with the general population. What's the number of the general population of the town of Norfolk outside the walls of the Norfolk prison currently active? Like I know current from when you say it is current to date from onset. I'm talking
current right now,
current,
is
like
25.
right now, today, whatever the heck, December something. This first.
As of so I get reports Monday and Thursday, and as of yesterday, it was 25 residents in the community.
Thank you. That was the number that I was looking for. Thank you.
Yep.
And I'm going to mute. No, I'm not. I'm going to try to mute.
Anita, any questions or comments? No. So I'll just quickly throw in there that, since we've been reporting since the beginning of the spike in the prisons, where we were obviously impacted by the increase in cases in that one area, We've attempted to put as much information as we can out there with as much color to be able to sift through the gaps that exist in the numbers that we are provided and the reporting that we're provided. So we'll continue to do that up until we get to a point where we flatten out, or we don't need to do that because the numbers are singular and don't have an impact from an institution or the correctional facility. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
I can add one more item. I learned late this afternoon. Thank you. I learned late this afternoon that the state's going to start doing wastewater testing at the sewer treatment plant for the prison, and because that, as I understand, is a good indicator of cases that will probably become apparent. They're doing that in several locations throughout the state because they're hoping that that will give them a better understanding of what cases may be coming and be able to manage those cases more effectively. Hopefully keep people from getting as sick or getting sick at all. Thought that was a good move that you might like to know about.
That's great. Thanks, Blythe. Do we have any questions from those in attendance related to our COVID update? I am seeing none at this time, so we'll move on to our next item on our agenda this evening, which is our public comment period. During this period, anybody who would like to share with the board or the town administrator is able to do so for roughly 3 minutes. We ask that you please keep it within the scope of either the select board or the town administrator. And as always, please keep it respectful. We do have one raised hand. Mr. Haddad, go right ahead, sir. If you could just state your address and your name.
Thanks, Kevin. Ed Haddad, 138 Red Maple Run. In advance of the police station meeting, which I understand is scheduled for December 15th, I just would like to request 2 things. One, in advance, we understand how the meeting is to be run, the formats, it is questions allowed, that kind of thing in advance, so that we understand what will happen that night before we get there to that meeting. And then secondly, if there are any exhibits or financial presentations that are to be presented, which I would expect to see some, is it possible that we can have access to them in advance and not just see them for the first time that night?
Sure. Blythe, did you want to touch on any of those?
Sure. So
how are we going to find out about this? Is it going to be posted on the town website? Sorry, Blythe. Yeah.
So let me take a shot at all 3 of those. So first, the meeting had originally been scheduled for December 10th, which is a Thursday. It was pointed out that that's the first night of Hanukkah. So a first question for the board is, would you like to pick another night, or are you comfortable continuing on that night if it means that some people might not be able to come? The hard part is picking a night where there's not a competing meeting. Thursdays is a pretty safe one, which would mean we need to go to the 17th, so I'll throw that out there. Picking a different night, we're competing with some other board who residents might want to attend both. In terms of the actual presentation, I am hoping that we're going to be getting questions from the public. We're going to be putting out an announcement once we've actually settled on the date, asking for those. And I expect we're going to be fine tuning this up until that day. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to put it out because we want to make sure it's absolutely as thorough and clear as we can make it. So that's our current thought. And then absolutely we need to advertise it. Want to get something out on the website tomorrow, get it out on the community page. It will be a Zoom meeting. We will have town council there to help moderate with questions. We definitely will want questions that night. I plan to basically give the presentation and then turn it over to him to help moderate the questions and who's the best person to answer them, because there may be a specific construction question that's best answered by, Matt Hafner, or a question about policing that's best answered by the chief. So want to make sure we have the right people there that night to answer any questions that come at us. So that's what I have to offer, Kevin.
Thanks, Blythe. And Ed, just to add to that briefly, the first step for us is to be able to solidify that date tonight. Once we get that date set, the intent is to get everything out in terms of advertising the meeting, a request for input from everybody. We'll be accepting input up until a couple of days before the actual meeting. Use that input to help craft and tweak the presentation so we ensure that we touch on all the points that are most important to the community. And to more directly answer your question, yes, there will be question and answer periods during the presentation live on the Zoom call as moderated by town council. So just to add to that, is that everything? Did we touch on everything we needed there?
Yeah, thank you. I guess it seems like tonight there's still a question of the date, so that's up to you guys, obviously.
Yeah. All right, thank you, sir. We do have a hand up from Mr. Rosenberg. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name is David Rosenberg. I live at 123 North Street, and I want to bring to the attention of the board 2 items which I am likely to make as requests to the board in the future, but not making them as requests now. First item is that when I was the chair of the Town Meeting Technology Committee, we found that the open meeting law made it awkward for us to make much progress because we could only talk to each other during the 2-hour slot once a month. I know that every public body has that limitation to the open meeting law, and as a consequence of that, legislation was drafted that would amend the open meeting law to permit public internet discussions where members of a public body could hold discussions, but with full transparency, so the public at large could monitor them as fully as the members of the public body themselves. That bill was filed so far in 5 consecutive legislative sessions, most recently filed by Jeff Roy, co-sponsored by about 20 other legislators, including our state rep, Sean Dooley. And I asked the board to send a letter of support to the committee considering it, and the board very kindly did that. So I anticipate that a similar bill will be filed in this coming session, and I'm likely to come back to the board with the same request that the board support it to the Joint Committee on State Administration and Regulatory Oversight. Also, since the bill has not been filed yet for the new session, now would be a good time if anybody wanted to look at it and see how it could be made better. So I will put in the chat section a link to the bill and also a website I have about it. So that was item 1. Item 2 is we have 4 registrars of voters. The town clerk is 1 registrar, and there are 3 appointed registrars that have staggered 3-year terms. People are nominated as registrars by the town political committees, and the select board appoints registrars. When the town clerk is enrolled in one of the 2 leading parties, it's obvious what happens. The law requires that 1 appointed registrar be from that party and the 2 other appointed registrars be from the other leading party, so that including the town clerk, there are 2 registrars from each of the 2 leading parties. When the town clerk is not enrolled in either leading party, it's less clear how that should be handled. I wrote to Michelle Tassinari asking her for guidance about that. I got a response that didn't really answer the question, and Kevin very kind, and one of the reasons was because I'm not an appointing authority, and so Kevin very kindly forwarded basically the same question to Michelle, hoping that we'll get a more concrete answer. At the beginning of the meeting, Kevin told me he hasn't gotten a response yet. If the response is that there is a specific way that the three appointed registrars need to be allocated to the two parties, then that's done. We just follow the law. If the response is that there's a lot of discretion on the board part of the appointing authority, i.e. the select board, then I will make a proposal to the select board about how to fairly allocate three select registrars among two parties. That's a heads up for a possible future request to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosenberg. Do we have anybody else for public comment this evening? I am seeing no hands at this time, and so we will be moving on to our third agenda item this evening. Actually, we will not be moving on to that agenda item this evening. Is that correct, Blythe?
That's correct. We haven't gotten the final approval from the Department of Revenue on all of the various items that need to be done in order for us to have this hearing. So really the question for you tonight is when can we all meet again? Ideally beginning of next week, as early as possible, to reschedule this so that we can get that done. It's important because we then need the DOR to approve the tax rate in order for us to be able to send tax bills out. So apologize, but our work is done, but we haven't gotten the sign-offs that we needed to move forward tonight. So my question would be, is it possible for the board to meet, and any time of day is fine with us, whatever is most convenient for you, on Monday, December 7th?
So I would say, I could be available at just about any time. I can move things around given the urgency to get this done, but I would recommend that we potentially try to find an evening slot, as I know that some people might be interested in tuning in to see the presentation and understand a lot about what's going into it. So if it was my preference, I would, pick one of the normal 6 to 8 p.m. kind of windows on one of the first couple of nights of the week.
I'm available Monday or Tuesday in the evening.
I'm available Monday evening. Tuesday evening I can do from 7:30 onward.
How about Monday, if that works for everyone? What would you prefer, the usual time of 7?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. All right, 7 p.m. on Monday it is. So I do expect we can get you the presentation out. Hopefully we'll hear from our DOR rep sometime tomorrow.
Very good. Thank you, Blythe.
Thank you.
Our next item this evening is to please consider approval of 2 items regarding the Abbeville 40B project on Lawrence Street, which include an approval of a memorandum of agreement and the acceptance of a gift of $136,800 for road repairs. Blythe, any additional background for us?
Yes, we're actually not prepared to move, or we're prepared to move forward on it, but I heard from Attorney Hill yesterday that the attorney for Mr. DePlacido has not had a chance to get to this final document, so they aren't ready to move forward. That's why Mr. Hill is not here tonight. So I don't know whether we'll be able to take this up on December 15th or it will kick into January. That's the reason we're not. I can tell you some about it. Certainly he's much more, he has much more detail than I do, but if you have any general questions about it, you'd like to know, I'm happy to go over what I can tell you, and then we'll get into the details at the next meeting.
Does anybody on the board have any questions for Blythe related to this agenda item before we get on to the next meeting? Seeing some head shakes, so I believe that is a no, Blythe. We look forward to bringing this up the next time we meet. Thank you.
Yep.
Our next item this evening is to please consider approval of 2 intermunicipal agreements, one being the emergency vehicle technician services with the town of Foxborough and the shared IT technician services with the town of Millis. Go ahead, Blythe.
I'm excited to talk about these. Norfolk has some experience with service sharing in that we're part of the Metacomet Emergency Communications Center, the MEC, and that's an intermunicipal agreement. but to my knowledge, that's the only one the town has done to date. And so what we have here are two opportunities to share services with two other communities. And what I love about this is the ability to do some of the work that the town needs to do at a lower price point than we can do on our own. So I like to search these things out, and we have two of them for you tonight. The first one includes utilizing the services of the town of Foxborough to do some of the work required on our emergency vehicles in the fire department, both fire engines and ambulances. As you probably all know, we have two mechanics in our DPW, and they take care of a lot of our needs of our fleet, whether it's police cars, fire trucks, small SUVs, lawnmowers, you name it. But what they don't have is the equipment, the technology, and the training to take care of some of the specific needs of emergency vehicles. These vehicles need regular tests performed on them to make sure they're certified throughout the year. They need services. And for those, right now, Norfolk contracts those out. We go to outside private companies to do that work. And this situation here, Foxborough has people on staff, they have the equipment, and they're located right next door to us. So they approached us about being willing to, on an as needed basis, for us to be able to bring our various pieces of equipment there to them to have the service done. In almost all cases, they can perform a service at a lower cost than taking it to a private firm. And this offers several other benefits. Because they're located right next door, the amount of time that it will take for us to take a vehicle to be serviced and bring back is going to be a lot shorter. So less time, the vehicle is not in town for service in Norfolk, and cheaper because we're not going to be spending our staff time driving vehicles further away. I think some of them go as far as at least Sterling. So there's a memo in your packet from the chief. We're not obligated to any dollar amount with them. And they're not absolutely obligated to do the work for us if there's some reason why they're busy and they can't help us. This is generally work that all can be scheduled. So it won't, it shouldn't impact their ability to help us, but we're going to learn as we go. And the monies that we would have been paying for this are already included in the Public Works Department budget. That's where all monies for various vehicle repairs are included. So we see it as a win-win, and ability to work with another department. And they're excited because they are not fully busy all the time. And so it gives them the ability to keep busy and to bring in some revenue for the people they already have on staff. If I were them, I'd be doing the same thing. And I think overall, it should cost the town of Norfolk less money over time to do what we're required to do without buying all the equipment and staffing up to do it ourselves. So that's an overview for it. In your packet is the draft agreement. It has been reviewed by town council as well as the town of Foxborough's council. And we do have a couple of items at the end in Exhibit B we need to flush out. But if you are in agreement with this, then the motion that we scripted is for the board to give approval to the chair to sign it once we have finalized all those small details. Do you want to stop there, or do you want me to go into the Millis agreement?
We can stop there if anybody has any questions on the first item. Anita, Cece?
First, I wanted to commend you for your creativity in finding these shared agreements. I agree, for us smaller towns to share services in general makes it really good, seems like a good idea. I do wonder sometimes if we couldn't, like, if we do this with the schools and we do this with our tech and this with our fire, and maybe we should have a bigger circle, but just for your ease, if more than anything else, because it's a lot of work to have all those individual partnerships. I read it quickly. I didn't see anything about the length of term of the agreement, but maybe I was reading fast.
So that's a good point. We had not settled on that exactly. I would generally say that we wouldn't want to do them for longer than 3 years. I think that's a fair amount. We can't contract for longer than that without special approval or changing our bylaws anyway. I think you don't want to make them too short because you really want to develop a relationship and then keep it for a while and then just revisit to make sure that it's working. So when you see the Millis agreement, you will notice it is 3 years. I would recommend the same for this. But there is a clause to end it if for some reason it's not working. And as I said earlier, we don't have to go take all our trucks to Foxborough. If there's a reason that they can't help us or it needs to go somewhere else, we're still going to do that. So I think the amount of flexibility we have makes me very comfortable with a 3-year agreement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. All right, Blythe, did you want to talk about the Millis agreement?
Yes. So this one I think you already know a little bit more about, simply because part of the transfers at town meeting was $25,000 into the IT salary budget to exactly for this. Millis approached us over a year ago because they've had one of their Board of Selectmen members who's a retired IT guy doing all their IT work, and he's getting a bit tired of that. We had both tried to hire part-time people. We had one leave us about a year ago, and both were unsuccessful in finding someone who wanted to work part-time without benefits and at the price point that we'd advertised it. So we talked about this again, and they want to hire somebody at least 20 hours a week, and we would like to bring back somebody. We had someone for 20, but being budget conscious, want to start at 15 to give us some, give Ton some support, because being one guy covering every department but the library has been exceedingly difficult, and COVID hasn't helped in the last year. So this would also be a 3-year agreement. We would be have the ability to buy up to 20 hours of time if we discern we need it. The employee will be that of the town of Millis. When we did the analysis, Millis's benefits are slightly lower in cost than Norfolk's. So it made sense for both towns for Millis to be the hiring, the employer of the person that is brought on, and they will work out a schedule so that they're 20 hours a week there and 15 hours a week for us. Supporting Ton, and in your packet is a list of all the various tasks that this person will do. I've worked with Mike Kaczynski, the town administrator there, in the past. We were both in other communities before this, so I have a high amount of trust in him that we'll work this out well together, and both of us are excited about giving our staffs a little bit of support to get all the work done that we have. One thing I would point out is, the budget that was passed up for $25,000 was for January through June. So we'll be very transparent about it. We will need to increase the budget for FY22 to cover a full year. But overall, this will, like the Foxborough agreement, will cost us less than doing it ourselves, because when we had a person ourselves, it was 20 hours a week and we were paying for benefits for 20 hours. In this situation, it's going to be 15 hours, and we're going to share the cost of the benefits with Millis proportionally. So overall, it should cost us less. So that is my overview.
Thank you very much, Blythe. Any questions, CC, Anita, related to the Millis agreement for the IT support? No? I will also note that about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, we initiated discussions with our regional school committee, regional school towns, Rentham and Plainville, to also talk about other opportunities for shared services. So obviously some things got in the way of that, like the lights going off in the office every couple of minutes. Hold on, there we go. More related to COVID issues got in the way of those discussions. So Blythe, I imagine those discussions will continue once we get to a better place with the other town administrators, correct? Awesome. Thank you so much. At this time, I'll open it up for any questions from those who are in attendance. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function. I am seeing no questions at this time, so I will move that the board vote to authorize the chair to execute an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Foxborough for emergency vehicle technician services. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is a unanimous vote. Thank you. And one more. I move that the board vote to authorize the chair to execute an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Millis for IT technician services. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is a unanimous vote as well. Thank you very much. Our next item this evening is to please consider awarding a contract to Advantage Drug Testing for a 3-year period from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2023 for the administration of a drug and alcohol testing program for municipal employees. Blythe, a little background, please.
So every municipal employee who has a commercial driver's license, a CDL license, which is generally Public Works Department, is required under federal law to be part of a pool for random drug and alcohol testing, as well as if there's an incident, an accident or something that requires testing, subject to that as well. We take advantage of the regional surge group, the 23-town collaborative, to bid out these things, so we don't do it ourselves. So in your packet is the pricing and the details of this contract to award to Advantage Drug Testing. It's actually managed by our office to coordinate who gets, who is lucky enough to get a random test on a certain day to come up to town hall and have that, and then paid for out of the DPW budget. That's really all I have to tell you about it. Pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Blythe. And I'm sorry if I missed it, but did we go with Advantage the last contract period, or did we change?
I think it's the same, but I'd have to double check with Nancy.
Okay, just curious. Thank you. Questions from the rest of the board? Anita, Cece? Nope, seeing none. Open it up to any questions for those in attendance related to our current agenda item on drug and alcohol testing program. I am seeing none. So I will move that the board award a contract to Advantage Drug Testing for a 3-year period from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2023 for the administration of a drug and alcohol testing program for municipal employees in accordance with the requirements set out in the Surge RFP. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Our next item this evening is to please consider amending the fees for liquor license renewals for 2021 for on-premise establishments. I know that we talked about this before, Blythe, but anything new for us to share?
Nothing new. Whereas you know from the next item on our agenda, it's renewal time. So wanted to follow through on the board's discussion about whether or not you want to make any changes to it. Our recommendation is that the changes would just be for establishments that have an all alcohol license for restaurants in town, or the one on-premise wine and malt license, which is a smaller amount. All told, these fees are together bring in $8,600 per year. It's not a lot of money. If this wasn't a COVID year, I'd actually be suggesting that we look at them compared to what other towns charge, but that's obviously not a good thing to approach this year. from this research we've done and what other towns are doing, all are not changing what liquor stores are charged. Those have been, I'm not going to suggest they're doing okay, but perhaps they're doing better than restaurants. And the licenses, the other licenses, you'll see the fees are quite low, and probably not quite impacted quite as much as full restaurants are. So we scripted a motion for a 50% reduction, but clearly that amount is up to the board's decision. All revenue is important, but if you feel that a higher amount or waiving them all together is the most appropriate for Norfolk, we certainly would support that.
Thank you, Blythe. I appreciate the background and the scripted motion. Obviously, we'll discuss as a board in terms of our expectation from a rounded figure. But from my perspective, I would support waiving the fees for all alcohol on-premise license fees for next year for the 4 restaurants, if it were up to me. I think that for $950, the impact it'll have on these businesses is much more than the negative implications it would have on the town. Plus, I would love for Norfolk to be a leader in the way that we partner with our local establishments, seeing as how small we are and how small these business owners are. And we're not dealing with chain restaurants here that have national representation. These are local people who have 1 or 2 locations max. So from my perspective, I would support waiving the fees for 2021, but I will toss this to the board for their thoughts and opinions. Cece?
I agree. I think that, some folks may say, well, it's a slippery slope, giving people this kind of concession. But to your point, we're not talking about a cheesecake factory, which may in and of itself, if it was in our community, be subject to another scrutiny, right? You want them to stay, you want them to do well, but perhaps it wouldn't be something where we would say abrogate 100% of it. In this instance, we're talking about our neighbors, we're talking about our friends, and we're talking about an amount of money that we'll feel because we're small, but they feel incredibly more than we ever will. And that's part of our role. So I absolutely agree.
Thank you, Cece. Anita?
I also agree with waiving those fees. I feel like it's a really, those smaller restaurants have done so much for our town again and again and again, and not only feeding us, but employing us and supporting our youth sports clubs and things like that. So I feel like it's our turn to do for them. And Blythe is saving us so much money with all these regional agreements that we can easily afford to waive it for 1 year. So I would agree with waiving those fees this year.
So Kevin, my suggestion just is that we scripted the motion for, you mentioned just restaurants. There's also one establishment that does have a on-premise wine and malt. My suggestion would be that you waive that. That's $800. You waive that one completely as well.
Agreed. All right, so at this time, I will open it up for any comments from those in attendance. If you have a comment or a question, please use the raise hand function at this time. I'm seeing none. So with that, I will move that the board vote to waive the on-premise all alcohol liquor license renewal fees and the on-premise wine and malt license fee for the calendar year 2021. Blythe, is that good?
That's great.
That's good. All right. Do I hear a second?
Anita was headed for her unmute button, and I figure I'm always bogarting the second roll, so I'm gonna.
No, I was just getting ready, Cece, trying to be efficient here. I second it.
We have a seconded motion. I don't know what that was, but now we have a seconded motion. Do we have any further discussion? We are hearing none, so we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye. Cece, you went on mute. I think that you are reversed in your mute button.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, there's something wrong with my thing, so I keep clicking on it and it keeps disappearing. CC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Our next item this evening is to please consider approval of the following licenses expiring at the end of the year: liquor, common victualler, entertainment, class 1, 2, and 3 auto dealers, and taxi. Blythe, anything else we need to know here?
Just that the spreadsheets in your packet, will notice some red marks with waiting for some applications and some information. As we did last year, in order to be efficient, we're asking you to approve these prospectively, and as long as all of these establishments have done all their paperwork by the end of the year. Just, I know that you and Cece know this, but for Anita's benefit, licenses have to be renewed, signed in November, and executed in December. If any of these establishments don't renew them, they have to start all over as if they have a brand new license in the next year. So we've put a lot of time and effort into chasing them down and making sure that all this paperwork gets done, because it's a real burden for them and for the board if we have to start from the very beginning. Nobody wants that. So, please don't be concerned that we're still waiting for some things. We spend the month of December following all of this up. These lists reflect the businesses that are operating right now and need to be renewed. And I don't really have a lot to add unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Blythe. Any questions, Anita or CC? Seeing some head shakes there. We'll open it up for any questions from those who are in attendance tonight. Please use the raise hand function if so.
Donna Jones.
Go right ahead, Donna.
North 64 North Street. In the list, there's Center Ice. Is that the Norfolk Arena? Not necessary for the alcohol, but.
So the alcohol license is for 4 Kicks. They can serve beer and wine. The other is just, let me check.
Perhaps I jumped in too soon. This is for the
common victualler. Center Ice just sells some food, so all they have is a common victualler license.
But I'd never heard of the Center Ice business before.
It's the ice rink.
Okay.
Near the Millis line.
Which is commonly known as the Norfolk Ice Arena.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we just point out all of these, once we get all the licenses finalized, we will be getting a hold of you, because we'll need many signatures, as at least 2 of you know.
I'll start warming up now. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions from those in attendance. So with that, I will start the motion train. First, I move that the board approve and execute all liquor license renewals for 2021, subject to the receipt and all required documentation and inspections.
Second.
Do I hear a second? Hearing a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
Actually,
Go ahead,
Kevin,
Blythe.
I would like to make a friendly amendment. I know you didn't read the section on payment of fees, but and because I know we're waiving the renewal fee, but each of these businesses does have to pay an inspection fee of $100 for their inspection by the building department and fire department of the establishment. So unless we want to waive that fee as well, then we would still want that item in the motion. So the fee is $100 to have staff go and do that annual inspection.
I think I would just accept a friendly amendment that the payment of fees be included for that singular item, unless anybody has any contention to that.
Thanks.
Oh man, these lights are killing me. There we go.
Efficiency.
Yeah.
You should bring an oscillating fan.
Ah, brilliant. Next time. Or just bring one of the kids and have them wave around on the table on here.
I saw somebody put
All right.
a little shelf by their light switch, and they had one of those cats, and it just sat by the light switch.
I'm sure I could get the 3-year-old to do that, right? No. All right, our next item is I move that the board approve and execute all common victular licenses renewals for 2021, subject to the receipt of all required documentation, inspection, and payment of fees. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, further discussion. Hearing none. Do we have a roll call vote? Kevin Calcutt, aye.
Susie Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is unanimous. I also move that the board approve and execute all entertainment license renewals for 2021, subject to the receipt of all required documentation, inspections, and payment of fees. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
Susie Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
That is unanimous. Next, I move that the board waive the Class 3 hearing for Norfolk Auto Repair. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
Susie Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
That is unanimous. Next, I move that the board approve and execute all Class 1, 2, and 3 auto dealer license renewals for 2021, subject to the receipt of all required documentation, inspections, and payment of fees.
Second.
Do I hear a second? Hearing a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
Susie Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is unanimous. Blythe, I saw you threw me a curveball there. Our last one is I move that the board approve and execute all taxi license renewals for 2021, subject to the receipt of all required documentation, inspection, and payment of fees. Do I hear a second? Hearing a second. Do we have any further discussion? I'm hearing none. So we'll do one last roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
Susie Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is unanimous as well. Thank you all very much. Our next item this evening is to please discuss any website posting of board correspondence. I do not believe that we are in receipt of any new correspondence to be posted, although I will toss it to the rest of the board for any input they may have. Anita or Cece, anything received that we need to discuss? No? Very good. So next we'll be moving on to our town administrator updates. Go right ahead, Blythe.
2 grants to tell you about. You may recall there was a question at town meeting about any federal highway transportation traffic safety type grants. And we do apply for one every year. And this year we have received it. $11,715 is coming from the feds through the state for municipal road safety, for traffic enforcement, for the purchase of any equipment and payment of salaries to undertake traffic enforcement. So good news about that. And then every year as part of our Maya insurance program, we are eligible to apply for a risk management grant. This year we applied for some equipment to be able to put up some safety barriers at the transfer station. It was identified that there were some locations where it was not as safe as it could be for people going to put things into bins and roll off containers. That grant is just over $10,000. It's come to us. A couple other things. I went out and had a chance to look at the whole Brook Street well field today. It's coming along. Most of the site work is coming along. Wrap up actually pretty quickly in the next couple of weeks, and then it'll be all quiet out there until about May, when the prefab building gets delivered to be installed. I understand that everything in the building pretty much comes ready to go. I guess that's why they call it prefab, including most of the controls. And so we're still hopeful that it'll be up and running for next summer, which will be great. Couple of things coming up in terms of things on your agenda. We're going to start doing in each of the next couple of meetings, having a different department give you a short presentation about their capital budget. You know, gave it to you, and then we just kind of didn't talk about it anymore. So we want to give you some information about each of those, and help bring to life what that document means and what's coming in the future. So we're going to be starting with a small one in a police department. We'll be in on December 15th to talk about the replacement of police cars and service revolvers. Their ask is small compared to others. We also, the next meeting, are going to have NCTV joining us for two things. One, we need to have a hearing regarding the renewal of the Verizon cable TV license. We had one for Comcast about a year ago. And we also need the board to approve what's called an ascertainment report. NCTV spent quite a bit of time working on what their capital needs are going into the future. And that board needs to approve that, which becomes the basis for the town renegotiating its license with both Comcast and Verizon for the next 10-year period. Those licenses are expiring in 2022 and 2023. So we'll be giving you that report, and Katie will be joining us to go over what they're going to be looking for to keep their operations as robust as we've come to expect in the coming years. Next item. So we have a number of street signs in town. I don't know how long they've been in place, but the tall white poles that show, say Main Street on one side and Medway Street on the other, those are actually not at all compliant with federal requirements. They're nice looking, but they don't meet the requirements. And some of them have started to degrade over time. And we also have new streets, new signs. So just to alert you, we are going to start to slowly replace those, and any new signs we have to put in are going to meet this is a mouthful, the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. They're going to be green reflective signs. They're going to have the town's seal on it in black and white. Decided to go with a less expensive black and white version rather than any color on it. The law requires that you only have a choice of 3 colors. So green has been selected. And they're going to be larger in size because I don't know about the rest of you, but for those of us with aging eyes, they need to be a certain size so that folks can read them. So I know there'll be disappointment that the white signs will slowly over time go away, but we need to do that. We're going to eventually need to replace a whole lot of signs in town. Stop signs, yield signs, speed signs, all have to meet these requirements. And you're going to see that show up in our operating budget requests going forward to start to have money to take care of those. So I want to tell you about that. Also, and I should mention this earlier, NCTV has for quite a couple of months here been working on how they can set up room 124 so that we can get back to having some in-person meetings for the boards, but at the same time meet the gathering requirements and have others, residents who might like to be able to come to a meeting still participate like they are tonight, but not be in the building with us. They have landed on a solution to that. They're going to be installing that equipment at the end of December, right before Christmas, which means that possibly at our January 5th meeting, the board could meet with myself and Judith and maybe a staff member or consultant, whatever might need to be at the meeting in person, and then enable the public to be able to join us remotely. So pretty exciting. And we'll be able to offer that opportunity to other boards as well. Whether everyone wants to take us up on it, I don't know, but wanted to make sure that you knew about that as well. And let me just check my list. That's pretty much it, except that we do need to pick a date for the police station presentation. Just want to get back to that before we close the meeting. So thanks.
Thank you, Blythe. I don't know if it's of great importance, but to the point of this changing of the street signs, one of the things that's most unique about Norfolk is the fact that the street signs don't match any of the surrounding towns. You essentially know when you're in Norfolk as you see those street signs, not the rusted town line signs that tend to border most of the town. So while I understand, it doesn't meet federal guidelines, and obviously we've been in violation of that for God knows how long, it would be nice to see something that kind of mirrors that uniqueness. I don't know how much variability exists in what's approved and meets the guidelines, but just from my perspective, it would be great to have something that would have the same kind of identifier for individuals as you come into the town. I don't know how you do that. I don't know. You said there's limited colors, but it would just be nice if there was some kind of thought to that put into it.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know when I'm in Medway because they're blue. I think the choices are blue, green, and like white. I think that's all there is. I live in Westboro, and I just learned that my nice maroon sign is not legal. So we can take a look at that. I don't know exactly how we landed on green. If there's a choice that would help make it more identifiable, I'll certainly talk with Public Works about that.
Thank you, Blythe. And then in terms of a date for our police discussion, I would be in support of moving it to the following week to December 17th. The reason being that it will give us a good, strong 2-week period to collect input and to really craft something that will be complete and comprehensive. But I understand that that does start to border, in between a couple of different holiday seasons for individuals in town. There might be some people who may be going away without telling others they're going away or whatever the case may be. But that would be my preference, at least from what I'm looking at on my side of things. But I'll open up to the rest of the board for their thoughts and opinions. Cece?
My question's about the signs as well. What's the statute that we're in violation of? And are we in violation in terms of it's a mandate that the federal government has indicated that if we don't change our signs, we're going to lose funding? Or is it just like, what's the statute? Because to Kevin's point, maybe it seems like not a big deal, it's just a sign, but it seems like a big enough deal that I'd love to have some vetting before just all of a sudden one day there's a new sign involved. So that's my question.
So I can't cite the federal statute but I will get that for you. It is a mandate. There isn't a financial implication if we don't pass it. The financial implication is more that maybe not necessarily for a street sign, but any other types of signs that regulate where people are on the street or whether they yield or not. If those are not up to snuff and there's an accident, I think the town leaves itself vulnerable to being sued for not being up to date. I know we put recently when we did road lines, we painted a yellow line down a street where there had been one before, and the resident was unhappy about that. And we said, well, actually, by the size of the street, it's supposed to have a yellow line, even though it didn't have one before. So, when we started to put the capital budget together, we started to budget there 15 grand a year, but that didn't meet our requirements for being a capital item. This is going to happen very slowly because otherwise we would need to be putting tens of thousands of dollars into a budget. We're looking to start adding to it slowly and have monies to put correct signs in and slowly over time change the others. I'm talking a few years.
I appreciate, and you were pretty clear about that in your initial assessment that you're speaking slowly. And I also appreciate what you're saying about safety, but I think what you're talking about with respect to safety, as you indicated, is our traffic direction signs, stop signs, yield signs, thickly settled signs, whatever, signs that direct people how to engage in behavior, that if they're there, if they're not there, if they're obstructed, if they're not large enough and an accident happens, I could see there being liability. I appreciate you getting me the statute, because I'm just talking about the white poles with the names down them. And I'm really, quite honestly, yeah, expense is an issue. And I agree with you that there are some that, right, the lettering has come off, and so those would need to be replaced no matter what. And then, you know, a look at the statute is going to tell me whether, if you are replacing a sign, does it have to be, et cetera, et cetera. So, because I do think, and I know, again, I know it's going to sound silly, for me, it seems, to echo Kevin's point, no, it isn't why I moved to Norfolk, but it is one of the reasons, like you said, Blythe, like, I'm like, oh, I'm in Millis now, or, you know, or if I'm driving around and okay, now I'm in Walpole, now I'm back in Norfolk. And, you know, if there's a mandate, that's one thing. If it is that impacts our pecuniary interest, or even if it's, you know, there's something that indicates that it's going to open us up to liability. But if not, I just want to know more, I guess. I just would like to take a look and figure out what's what. And I appreciate Kevin's suggestion in the event that it is, you know, absolutely has to be that every sign, you know, by attrition or in blocks, however you end up doing it, needs to get changed, that there be something that makes it still a Norfolk sign. But that's it. So I appreciate you getting it whenever you, not today.
The other thing that we deal with is people, I think it's kids probably, who go and change the sign so that it doesn't line up with what the streets are, and we have, you know, get people confused, have to change them back, they pick them up and turn them.
Sure, and I get that, but I also I read a lot. I certainly wouldn't know anyone or have any personal experience with sign shenanigans of the regular old signs that aren't the big white ones. So I'm sure that's not the reason we're doing it. So I just want to take a look at the statute.
Sure.
Cece, did you have any thoughts on the date of the police station meeting? I'm sorry.
That's
Oh,
okay.
as for the date of the police station, my thinking on that one is that if it's between a night where there may be people who have to choose between a family celebration or the meeting versus people who have to choose between one or another municipal meeting, I think that people should have to choose between one or another municipal meeting rather than between a religious celebration and a meeting. That being said, I don't know if there's anything else on the 17th. I am available.
So I like the signs too. Ours gets mildew on one side and I'll go out and wipe it down to keep it nice and white. And so that being said, I understand your situation. It's December 17th, Hanukkah is not over. So we are still in Hanukkah, I believe, on the 17th.
Yes, but the first night of Hanukkah is more of an issue than other nights.
Thank you, David. So I'm free on the 17th, then that's fine.
Town council is available that night too, that I know of.
Very good. Thank you very much, Blythe. Appreciate the updates. At this time, I'll open it up to anybody who is in attendance for any questions related to said updates. If you do have any questions, please use the raise hand function at this time. Mr. Haddad, go right ahead, sir.
I simply want to add in that I love those white street signs. You know, when I came to Norfolk, that was one of the first things that I noticed, and I was just entranced by them, and I was charmed by them, believe me. So to change them for some bureaucratic reason, I would resist it for as long as possible. That's all I have to say.
I knew this
And
was
I'm
going to be the
available on
biggest
the
issue
17th as
tonight. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Haddad. Donna, you have your hand up as well?
Yes, I also like the white signs that have both streets there. Other places you could go down, come to a side street, or you're coming off of Main and you don't know what street's on the side. Some intersections in other towns, you don't know, well, what street did I just come up to? Is it possible, as I understand it, there's a pole or of wood or metal in the middle of these white squares. Is it possible to shorten the white part, put the green sign on top of it, so we have both?
I can check with Public Works. I know that some of them, they're basically just a white post with a, you know, a
That-
PVC sleeve on it, and they are starting to all degrade anyway, even if we didn't need to do this. So
Yeah.
I said I knew this would be the toughest thing we talked about tonight, and I'm very sorry. But you know, like I say, we're not going to do this quickly because it needs a fair amount of money to do it town-wide. So we will be selective. I just didn't want you to drive by one day and go, what happened?
Thank you.
Thanks, Blythe. Our next item this evening is to approve some warrants. We have 6 warrants that are listed in the agenda for this evening. I move that the board approve 6 warrants for the period of November 17th, 2020 to November 24th, 2020, as printed on the agenda for this meeting. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Bantine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is unanimous. And our final item on the agenda this evening is to please consider the approval of some minutes. Anita, go right ahead.
I move that the board vote to approve the minutes of the November 2nd and 17th, 2020 regular meetings.
Second.
Hearing that second, do we have any further discussion? One more roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Bantine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is unanimous as well. Well, that takes us to the end of our agenda this evening. Blythe, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Yes, thanks to Judith. She pointed out to me, since we've been in the meeting, that there wasn't a vote on the amendment for the liquor license item once we made that friendly amendment. So if the board could just vote that again, we'd make sure we're all set.
Okay, I will revise the motion to, I move that the board approve and execute all liquor license renewals for 2021, subject to the receipt of all required documentation, inspections, and payment of fees. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Bantine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
Thank you very much, Judith, for catching that. Blythe, anything else from your perspective? Mr. Rosenberg, I see you have your hand up. Is that intentional?
Yes, it was intentional. I wanted to first thank the board for avoiding the conflict with the first night of Hanukkah. And secondly, I wanted to mention that I put in the chat information about the current version of the bill to permit public internet discussions that people in Zoom can see, but I understand people watching this on YouTube can't. And I was going to ask Andrew whether he could take the information and put it in the YouTube version. Basically, I am suggesting that if anybody wants to propose improvements to the language that's filed in the next session, now would be an ideal time to propose those improvements before it's filed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. I'll throw it around to the rest of the board for any final thoughts or comments before we adjourn. Cece, anything from your perspective? Head shake no. Anita, from your perspective? Head shake no. Okay, so with that, that concludes our meeting tonight. Our next meeting will be on December 15th, and we will be getting out some information shortly regarding our police station review meeting on the 17th.
And
Did I
December
say that
7th.
correctly?
Yes, you did. And also we'll meet on December 7th for the tax classification hearing at 7 p.m.
Correct. A December full of joy. Very exciting. So with that, I will move to adjourn this meeting of the Norfolk Select Board. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, further discussion? Hearing none. One last roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
Cece Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
Wow, very theatric voting tonight. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Have a very nice evening, and we will see you again soon.